I blindly followed his demands. My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything. My family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today. In closing, I'd like to say directly to the President, we honor our veterans even in the rain. You tell the truth even when it doesn't aggrandize you. You respect the law and our incredible law enforcement agents. You don't villainize them. You don't disparage generals, Gold Star families, prisoners of war, and other heroes who had the courage to fight for this country. You don't attack the media and those who question what you don't like or what you don't want them to say. And you take responsibility for your own dirty deeds. You don't use your power of your bully pulpit to destroy the credibility of those who speak out against you. You don't separate families from one another or demonize those looking to America for a better life. You don't vilify people based on the God they pray to, and you don't cuddle up to our adversaries at the expense of our allies. And finally, you don't shut down the government before Christmas and New Year's just to simply appease your base. This behavior is churlish, it denigrates the office of the president, and it's simply un-American. And it's not you. So to those who support the president and his rhetoric, as I once did, I pray the country doesn't make the same mistakes that I have made or pay the heavy price that my family and I are paying. And I thank you very much for this additional time, Chairman.
That was from Michael Cohen's testimony before the House of Representatives in February of 2019. February of 2019. Michael Cohen knows the blueprint of Donald Trump's moves, and that's why it's important that we listen to what Michael Cohen has to say when he predicts what Donald Trump has to do next. I recently talked to Michael Cohen on Political Beatdown about the Colorado disqualification ruling under 14th Amendment Section 3 after Donald Trump did exactly what Cohen said Donald Trump was going to do, not agree to a peaceful transfer of power. And now a state Supreme Court in Colorado, of course, we all know now, has ruled that Donald Trump's disqualified from the ballot in Colorado. That will go to the Supreme Court. Cohen's view on it's actually interesting, and Cohen and I have, I think, a pretty important debate that I want to share with you here as well. So without further ado, let me play for you this discussion where first I talk about the threats that Donald Trump has directed at the Colorado Supreme Court justices who ruled against it. Then Cohen and I get into a debate over why I thought that Donald Trump should be disqualified. Cohen feels that he just wants to destroy Donald Trump out the ballots. And then we talk more broadly about Donald Trump's behavior. So take a listen to this. Play the clip.
Let's talk about the Colorado Supreme Court decision. Let's talk about it first from the framework of what Donald Trump's been posting today. Donald Trump's been writing, "I'm not an insurrectionist. Peacefully, patriotically, crooked Joe Biden is." Donald Trump writes, "Biden should drop all of these fake political indictments against me, both criminal and civil. Every case I am fighting is the work of the DOJ and White House. No such thing has ever happened in our country before. Banana Republic, election interference," like all in caps, like just like a total maniac. And the very fact that he thinks that President Biden has that power over the DOJ and state prosecutions, which Biden does not, should tell you everything about what Donald Trump correctly and dictatorially views the role of the presidency. Donald Trump goes, "Crooked Joe Biden is a threat to democracy." And then he starts posting the photos of the 4 Colorado Supreme Court justices who ruled against him in the 4-3 decision, ordering that he be disqualified. And he reposts their pictures with statements like, "Communist thug Democrats dressed up as justices in Colorado. Where's the crime?" a group of kangaroo legal justice system thugs, and then shows their photo and says Colorado Democrat activist judges election interference. Look, Donald Trump's receiving his due process, right? This case went before a trial judge. It went before the Colorado Supreme Court, and it will go before the United States Supreme Court. It will go at every level on this issue of the 14th Amendment, Section 3. 14th Amendment, Section 3 is very clear in what it says. Those who aid in an insurrection or who support the insurrection are ineligible to hold office. And
Look, Ben, I had this with Katie yesterday. There's so many of the pundits on legacy media, and everybody has an opinion, right, on, what's going to happen, what should happen, and so on. I'll be very honest with you. I'd rather beat the shit out of him at the polls. In that way, these maggots, these folks that I always say have 4 teeth and 3 brain cells, that they cannot start running through the streets screaming, Trump won, Trump would have won, Trump should have won. Now let's beat the shit out of him at the polls. This is so unprecedented. First of all, I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to have a decision on this, at least until the election anyway. That's just my opinion. And, I don't like the courts making a determination who is going to be president of the United States under any circumstances. But Ben, you know what I love the most about this political beatdown? I love the fact that you and I, we disagree on things, but we are so on other issues, so in touch. Salty, if you have it, when you were talking about right there, when you were talking about where Biden should drop all of these fake, look at what I had done. I had posted this. This was like at 3 o'clock in the morning when I saw it and when I usually get up. How can you, the former president, be so out of touch with how the system works? A POTUS does not have the ability to start or stop indictments, state or federal. If you want to understand this, I discussed this on my Mea Culpa podcast, blue icon background. Facts matter. I mean, how funny is that? We're saying the exact same. He has no clue how anything runs. He doesn't understand how the Justice Department runs. He doesn't understand the Constitution and what it stands for. He doesn't understand anything other than what he wants, and always what he wants has to be a benefit to him. No one else, just him.
Cohen, question 1. Do you believe that January 6th was an insurrection?
100%.
Question
100%.
2. Question 2. Do you believe that Donald Trump supported, aided, or abetted that insurrection?
100%. I think he incited it, he aided it, and he abetted it.
Question 3. Do you believe that Donald Trump, when he held the office of the presidency, was an officer? Do you believe the United States presidency is an office within the United States government?
100%, absolutely.
And do you believe that those who draft the Constitution meant the words that they say, and we should apply the common sense meaning to words in the Constitution?
See, this is where I have an issue. I don't know what the drafters of the Constitution were thinking and the interpretation of it. Where I think that we find ourselves in some sort of a different situation here is, again, whether or not it requires somebody to be convicted of incitement, or Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, insurrection, or is it that you can just make the claim that there's somebody that was involved in an insurrection? You see, while I agree with you 100%, he incited it, he engaged in it, he promoted it. The part I don't know is whether or not the framers of the Constitution were referring to somebody being actually charged with it, or is it just somebody saying it because there are people, many people in this country, the maggots as an example, that will turn and tell you, I don't think Donald Trump incited it, nor do I consider it to be an insurrection. So whose opinion in this specific case matters? That's why I say this is a very, very novel issue, one that has never been discussed, talked about, never should have been, where you have a president that is actually being accused of such a crime, such an act. I would love to beat the shit out of him at the polls, more so than to have a Supreme Court make a determination.
Sure, but this is only a controversial issue now, I think, because the MAGA Republicans have rallied around the insurrection. I think in a normal time, you'd have Republicans and Democrats all say what happened on January 6th was a disgrace, was an insurrection, and we would all just apply a common sense meeting, and the Republicans would not be all in on saying this was a peaceful day and what a great day it was for our nation's history. That's where the Republican Party has taken over by MAGA is. So now it becomes this issue. So now it becomes an issue about whether it's self-enforcing because they want the lead insurrectionist to run the show. But I mean, just to me, Michael Cohen, you know, and as most constitutional scholars interpret it, that it's a self-enforcing statute because if the framers wanted to use something like you have to be convicted, they would say there's language where they talk about convictions in the Constitution, and here it doesn't say any of that. And here it basically says if you engaged in insurrection, you're disqualified. So the question of who decides it, well, a court decides it. The Secretary of State decides it first. Then the court hears the challenge. Then it goes to the state's highest court. And then it goes to the Supreme Court. But to me, it's not on the constitutional framers about why this is controversial. To me, it's because one of our two major political parties said we're all in on fascism and we're all in on the insurrectionists. And they now claim the insurrection is some credible political speech, which it's not. And that to me is more.
The goal was to retain power, plain and simple. And I told everybody at that House Oversight Committee hearing, my biggest fear is in 2020, if Donald Trump loses the election, there will never be a peaceful transfer of power. And it's so funny how the Republicans have this idea on peaceful transfer of power. I mean, they didn't say a word when Al Gore turned around and capitulated to Bush, right? And so on. He didn't fight it. He capitulated. He congratulated him. He did the honorable thing. Trump got his ass handed to him in the past election. And instead of owning your loss, instead of congratulating Joe Biden, well, how could he congratulate Joe Biden? Joe Biden's a loser. He's a winner. And so now the next 4 years, the big lie just keeps promoting and being regurgitated. Nobody trusts the system, government. Nobody trusts polling. Nobody trusts the poll machines. You got space lasers changing, the votes and so on. The nonsense that's coming out of this GOP. And yet people are still funding them. They're still supporting them. This is the part that I scratch my head and I just say, I don't get it.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.